So part two, we arrive at the health centre early in the morning because I want to get there before there's much of a queue. I don't speak the Valencian dialect, and I don't speak Spanish, but I speak both Italian and French, so I understand a huge amount of what's said. But because of that, I prepared very early on Monday morning. I produced a document that showed Wayne's full medical record in terms of anything important. His recent medical record showing that he'd had COVID at the end of summer last year, that talking about the flu, the chest infection, the medicines that he had been prescribed. So the doctor had everything he or she would need to know what had come before and where we were today. I wrote a very detailed list of symptoms as Wayne described them, and I translated those into Spanish. And so it took about an hour to sign all of the right forms. And then we proceeded to the doctor's surgery. Um, we saw her about an hour after arriving, and she was actually pretty kind of relaxed about how Wayne felt. She did ask him to stand up. We talked about the fact that we were worried he might be developing walking pneumonia or something we just didn't know. We're not doctors, that's why we went to see a doctor. And I made that clear. We didn't share any common language, so luckily I understood virtually everything, but I had everything documented, so it shouldn't have mattered either way. She did ask Wayne to stand up, and she put a stethoscope underneath his sweatshirt and listened to the back of his lungs. And she said that actually there was clearly not, it was certainly not bronchial in his chest, and it wasn't pneumonia because she could hear no fluid on the lungs. And she said that she was seeing a lot of similar symptoms in patients having complications from RSV, and she asked him if he still had his ventilator, which he did. And so she said, I'd like you to go home and I'd like you to rest and really rest and use the ventilator when you need it. Wayne was worried about using the ventilator because he thought it was causing him water retention problems. Um, it wasn't, but that was his thought at the time. So we left the doctor's surgery in good spirits. I will point out right now that she did not take his blood pressure, she did not take his pulse or listen to his heart. So I do think she failed him in terms of actually just making sure she did the very basic triage that I think any doctor should do, especially in the absence of a common language. Um, but we left in good spirits. Wayne and I actually walked to a cafe near the beach where we ate some calamari and bits and pieces. Then we idled home, and he rested for the rest of the weekend. He sent WhatsApp messages to my brother to say, there's no need to worry. He accidentally sent a message to my brother rather than to me earlier in the day, so my brother worried what was going on. I know that Amory Lydon also got messages from Wayne telling it, the doctor's not worried. It seems to be fine. I just need to have rest and blah, blah, blah. So he did rest that whole weekend. He did lots of work sitting in bed and sitting on the sofa. He was wrapped up, and Chips kind of took care of him. And Kate and I did some walking and did some shopping. And I made him chicken soup, and I made him little bits and pieces that help relieve his symptoms. By Sunday night, it was clear to me that his cough was getting worse rather than better, and um, I talked to him about the symptoms he was experiencing. His water retention was getting a lot worse. By Monday morning, he had water on the scrotum, and he was actually getting worried. He'd slowed down, so we went straight back to the same surgery. We saw the doctor within 5 minutes. She took him more seriously this time, but she didn't take it that seriously. She had him sit on the patient bed and asked him to lower his trousers so that she could see that his legs were swollen. He was under a lot of pressure and finding it hard to walk. She jumped on the idea that it might be a hernia, and she suggested that we go straight to the Hospital Clínico in the center of Valencia, which is a hospital with a global reputation. It's an amazing place, I've discovered later. Um, so I had to download a minicab app and find a cab quickly, and I took us to the hospital. Again, She did not take his blood pressure. She did not take his pulse, and she didn't listen to his heart. Um, and I asked her if she was going to provide me with something to take, a letter or, explanation of why we were turning up at the hospital. And she said, no, don't worry, I will send that all. And uh, we left, we got a cab, and we went to the emergency room. I'll end this here and record part 3.